Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today we're doing our 30th anniversary edition, a tribute to my mentors. I'm so excited to introduce you to them. They're going to share some great advice forward on things you should be doing in your journey as well. So if that sounds like fun, keep on listening. That's what we're doing on the podcast today. Welcome to Bliss to Abundance, the podcast for growth-minded travel entrepreneurs. All right, guys, I'm going to introduce you to two of my most favorite mentors. I have Ben Carnegie and Stacey Aldridge, who are absolutely instrumental in my career. And I'm going to introduce them and ask them a question here in just a second, but I want to share with you guys why I wanted to do this show. The TA community and how it exists today. I know you guys are mostly home-based. You don't have a lot of access to terrific mentors, a leadership structure that's in place a lot of times, and operational experience, things like that. So I have had these two amazing mentors and many other mentors in my life, but these are two of my very favorites, and I wanted to bring them on the show today so they can share their advice and tips forward with you. So Ben and Stacey, welcome to the show. Will you share with me what you remember and how we met? So Stacey will have ladies first, and then
yes,
ladies first.
Well, like, I gotta think. That's like 30 years ago.
30
Well,
years ago.
thank you for having both of us. It's really fun to get together and not only see Ben, but to see you in person and talk with you. And imagine that it's been 25 years maybe since I remember I took a crazy chance and hired you to come work for me as a trainer with no experience whatsoever. And I just liked your personality. So that's what it was. You and I worked in two different offices. I was a new manager, thought I knew what I was doing, and I really did not. And I needed to hire a couple trainers up in our Michigan office, and you fit the role. Now, I don't have the greatest memory, so I may make up some stories here, but truly, I remember that it was your personality, and you were just willing to do whatever. You were eager. Would take feedback. You would listen, and so you became a trainer, and then we've stayed connected really ever since.
I love that. No, that's it. And I'm just going to respond to that really quickly, and then we'll have Ben go. That's so funny because you're eager is right. Like, I was eyes wide open. I was so green. I literally went to travel school. I remember I was $1 million seller for a couple years, 2 or 3 years on the floor, right? Working, doing the calls. And I didn't have any training experience, but I did have like a love for like trying to help people and mentor people. And that's funny because what you just said is what I tell people all the time, maybe without even realizing it, but I say, hire for attitude, train for skill. Because that, having that can-do kind of thing is, and I was just so in love with the travel industry. I was like, hey, show me what to do and I promise I'll do it. I know I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but you were very gracious as a mentor, and I loved that. So Ben, first of all, Ben was the big kahuna guys running everything. He came to town and we would all get nervous. Ben's coming tomorrow, and he would walk on the floor. But I have some stories about Ben too, but I'll turn it over to you, Ben. How do you remember?
That makes me very nervous.
No, it's all good stuff, I promise.
Well, thanks again for the invitation. Like Stacey, I feel like I've just walked into a class reunion or something. It's been really a treat. Stacey and I stayed in touch for a little while, but I haven't seen Stacey in a very, very long time. And Cyndi, you've been really good about just keeping up and dropping notes once in a while of what you're doing and all the success that you've achieved. And again, I think a lot of it is your eyes wide open approach and your enthusiasm. When we worked together, I was new into that office as well. And we came into both having very settled environments in some regards, but they were environments that weren't given a lot of leadership from the host company particularly. So it was really fun to take the energy of people like you and Stacey and the others to say, we can make this a really working team. And we did. And it was fun. And it was great until corporate would come in and make decisions that we didn't like downsizing and things like that. But what I remember about you, and it is hard at age 63 trying to remember everything 30 years ago, but I remember the same as Stacey. It was your enthusiasm. I was like, how am I going to keep up with this young lady? She's going to, there are people that you chase to get things down, and there are people you chase to keep up with. And you were one of those. You had a lot of ideas, you had great enthusiasm. There was never a question about your skills because either you masked it very well or it was superseded by your enthusiasm and your can do attitude. So I think that's been amazing. And I think you've grown up in an industry that's changed tremendously, and not just in terms of content and leisure versus business and things that have been, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through a crash, we've gone through a rebuild. Now we're looking forward again, and it's exciting, and there's great opportunities for people to have really dynamic roles in this business, especially, and I should say either on the leisure or the business side. I work on the business side now. It's a little bit slower recovery than leisure. Leisure's taken off. When you are traveling now, the majority of people you're encountering are in leisure. And so it's just an exciting time for your company and for what you're doing. It's got an amazing contribution, I think, to people's planning and service as well as just professional opportunity.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's been so funny to watch the industry because really we've been all doing it 30 plus year. It's been in kind of these worlds of watching how much it's changed for sure. When I was thinking about doing this show today, I was thinking about both of you and I was like, what's like the common denominator when I thought, because I think back to how green I was, right? Like and that's how a lot of people come into the industry today. I'm super excited. I want to do all the things. I want to go all the places. And then you're hit with the reality of, but this is going to be work. But what I love about when I was thinking about the common denominator and why, it's like, why did these mentors have such an impact in my life? And it's a couple of things. One, I always felt like you cared about me as a person first in both cases, right? And in Ben's, Ben's scenario, I will say Ben actually had to turn me down for a job I really, really wanted once. I don't know if you remember when I interviewed along with someone else for I don't know if it was a director or manager position for the call center in Houston. And it was between me and another candidate. And I was so well prepared at the original interview. Then you called us back in and unprepared for a second interview. And I was so frazzled. Anyway, I didn't have enough experience and that was fine. But the way that you had the conversation with me with so much compassion and, instead of feeling, because I didn't get the job, instead of feeling defeated, I felt encouraged to keep going. And I think that says a lot about your character. And when I worked with Stacy too, the both of you always encouraged my gifts. And back, you have to think like the world we're in today, my gifts are very much treasured, the creativity, the enthusiasm, all those things. Back in corporate, it was very, you need to fit in this box in 1994, right? Like fit in this box, do what we say, sit at your seat, do the things. And I was like, what about this? And I was just kind of coloring outside of the lines always. And not, as I worked with different leaders and different settings and different, had different careers as I moved on, not everyone appreciated that in the same way. And I think it's the mentors and leaders that really see the potential in you. And instead of trying to squash it to fit organizational goals, you go, how can I leverage this or how can I inspire this? Like maybe we need to curve the edges so they can fit in this environment, but you never kind of tried to diminish my light. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one thing that I think is so important for, especially for agency owners and things growing teams, like don't forget. So I want to thank you for that and those pieces. But I have some questions for you guys that I really want to get into that I think because people don't have that environment where they have access to mentors and leaders, I want to ask you just a few questions. So the first one is, with the TA model, especially on the leisure side, being more home-based or working as contractors, which means, legally, companies, if I'm hiring all contractors, I can't give them formal required training, and leadership's kind of all over the place in a lot of cases. But what do you guys see as the challenges as the travel agent community, as they navigate this, how to work from home? How do they grow professionally when they don't have the access or kind of the same, luxury we did of being around other people who had done it before us? How do you guys feel like they're going to navigate that best?
That's a good question. I work with so many companies now where I was in the classroom teaching learning and development, all types of professional opportunities, and people would come to the classroom or they would come to work and they would have these people around you like you just talked about. And now that has been such a swift change that people are working from home. People don't have this access besides through a screen to their leaders or to a mentor. And I think it's really going to show a deficit in people's growth in the next 20 years. So that will be interesting to see how that goes. A couple of things come to mind, though, is I think it goes both ways. Number one, if you are leading people, you've got to figure out how you can mentor them, right? Is that meeting once a week in person? Is it a set time where we can have a conversation? Is it connections at conferences? Whatever it is. If I am a leader, I have to realize that one of my number one leadership roles is to mentor and guide that person. It's not to run the business. And number two, if I am an employee or someone that wants more mentorship, and I do think that the younger crowd is better at it, but asking for it, right? How can you mentor me? I need someone to talk me through pieces and parts. So it's got to be that two-way street where as a leader, I know I have to make this a priority. And as a new employee, let's say, I have to ask for it. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Ben,
Well, and
wisdom.
Ben, before you answer,
I don't want to follow from you on that one.
It's so good to be in you guys' energy again, because it reminds me, Stacy was my boss. She was my mentor. And before, there was no video, like there was no, you guys don't understand, there was no internet when we started, right? No internet. I had just gotten a cell phone. It was about this, it was like a brick, and I was so excited, right? But Stacy worked in the Indianapolis office, and she taught me everything about curriculum design. She ran her team. Half of her team was remote. All of those pieces I learned under her leadership, and she had to do it through the phone, but it was daily phone.
So true.
Yes.
Now I try to teach that. You're right.
Yeah, it was daily phone calls, and then you did, like we did that godforsaken 3 seats on each side airplane you would have me take to Indianapolis. Or you would take, remember that little flight? It was where they would pull the curtain across where the pilots were. It was like that puddle hop. It was only 30 minutes, but you would hop back and forth all the time. So we would do the in-person, we would do summits, and we would do things like that. But because I feel like, you had that bond and that relationship, but it's, how many leaders out there are doing the work that it takes to have those. I even know with my team, I have a team of 32 people that work for me. I can't get on the phone with all of them every day, but I have a leadership structure in place, and then those leaders work with their teams, and then we have the added benefit of having Zoom and things like that. But you're right, especially when in this contractor relationships, they're not employees, so they do have to have that two-way street. But you did it very well, Stace, especially before video. Imagine what we could have gotten accomplished with video.
Well, it's funny because I look back now and I've often thought I was a new manager. And I often thought, well, I know I did. I micromanaged, right? I was still learning, and I wanted to make sure you were doing this and that I had this under control. But I do remember that those phone calls were more, hey, I'm checking in with, I had a check-in with you at least weekly, where it was an hour or whatever phone call. And then, it was email daily. But to me now, it seems like micromanaging.
But I needed it, though.
Really, I did an okay job.
You did an awesome job. And when people are new, they need that micro at first. And then when they're going to be a producer, then you can go to macro, right? But you did exactly what was needed at the time. I think your instincts as a leader were just spot on. So full credit to that. Ben, what are your thoughts on kind of making that adaptation for the new generation?
Well, I think in a way, for me to adapt has been probably a bigger challenge than the new generation is going to have, because I think they are so much more savvy about, social media and the ability to interact with people. I have a global team today. I've got almost 2,000 people between the U.S., India, Europe, Costa Rica, Manila, and in a sense, we don't see each other but a few times a year, but our engagement is daily.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it's with different people, different times, and I've got a huge leadership structure in place as well. But I think it's really there's a couple of things that we try to do. One, we try to understand what people's priorities are and what they're doing, and we take a lot of notice in what they're doing, and both in terms of encouragement and recognition, but also sometimes in terms of ways to do it better. The other thing we try to do is particularly in my team, we are always video. We never do calls without video.
Mm.
We want to see how engaged people are, how they're focusing on the conversation. I have been known to hang up on meetings where people won't go on camera. I will say, just when you call me back, when you're ready to be on camera, let me know. And it's because we find it such more effectiveness. We need to be really pointed in how we communicate and what we want to accomplish when we talk to each other. That's another thing. So we have virtual happy hours so that we don't have that particular stigma. Today, our engagement is to find out how you're doing. How's your family? How are things going on? And that's always a big treat for us. For me, it's challenging because of my time zone. My happy hour might have to be at 11 in the morning. But,
Those cocktails out early. It's fine. No one's
yeah,
judging.
I've adjusted. So anyway, those are important things to do so that when we have our business meetings earlier, maybe at 4 a.m. my time, that people feel like that's really important, and we're going to get through what we're going to do in the 30 minutes that we've set aside for it, or however. But I think we really need to give our newer generation a lot of credit.
Mm-hmm.
They are much more resourceful than we were, I think. They know how to go in and find answers. They know how to go in and research things in a way we never even had capability to do.
Mm-hmm.
We had to open an OAG, 800-page
Big old
manual
wig.
of
I was
things.
talking about that yesterday. So funny.
It was like crud. So anyway, I think there's lots of great opportunities for them because they know how to navigate and think in a much broader way than we do.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there's a lot to be said of just honoring people wherever they are and whoever they are. Like you said, let the enthusiasm and the attitude win you over, and make the skills something that you bring, that you give them and you work together on. I think that was very well said.
Well, and I think the beautiful evolution of our industry is it's finally catching up to your leadership styles. Like maybe they were a little ahead of their time versus the get in the box and stay so rigid. And I think one of the beautiful things, especially like with this, what are they calling it? The big resignation with everyone leaving corporate and wanting to, build their lives around their business, and not, it's not so much the why are we here, like, right? Especially I think as we kind of, get older, and I'm reflecting on what's my legacy going to be and how do I want to spend the next 20 years of my life. I'm really kind of reflecting on, no one's going to give me credit for the 14-hour days I worked 20 years ago, or whatever the case is. So I do love that this new model is really, let's figure out how we should be honoring our lives and spending our time, and then you can build any business you want around your life. So I do like the flexibility of, like, kind of building it on being the artist of your masterpiece, the captain of your ship kind of thing. And I think that's always where I struggled with corporate before, even though I towed that company line and did all the things. But I wonder if you took, Cyndi, how she was back then, and popped her in today's model, what could potentially come from that. So I think it's interesting to see that evolve. And I think you're right, Ben. We have to give the new generation credit. Now, where I think, like to what Stacy said, it will be really interesting because where they do, at least in our classrooms, if we train a couple hundred people every month, and with the newer generation, they are horrified to get on the phone sometimes, or it's like those little interpersonal skills things that we're finding. Do you guys remember the telephone doctor programs? Like, you guys would have us, like, we would watch, and they would teach you like how to have a conversation. People are so used to texting and doing the stuff next level, which is fine. But then if you are working with clients who are our age or older, and a lot of people who are ideal clients and doing a lot of travel, I'm finding travel advisors have to kind of work in both worlds, where you have to get comfortable picking up the phone and having a conversation, calling suppliers. So we're seeing a few gaps there just in those interpersonal things. And even with my own children, right? Like, I'm like, no, you need to call. And they're like, I have to call. Isn't there an app or something? And they don't want to deal with people. And that scares me a little bit. So we force our students to do that a little bit. We force our kids to do that a lot because I think that the people who can really bridge the gap and have those strongest leaps, you have to kind of have that holistic approach to, how you're going about things. What do you guys think?
Well, I think demonstrating that and forcing it to some degree. I know that's the wrong word to use, but you've got these 5 employees and you want them making more calls. I mean, what's going to make that work is to actually call them and get them on the phone and, make that process work. Uh, it's such an interesting perspective because I go back and I think about
Yeah.
this younger generation and how they show up and virtually I can connect really well with them when it's difficult for me. So that is such a comfort zone for them. And I still, because of the way we were raised and the environment we lived in, and I just go back and I think about the managers or the leaders we had just in the company that we were with and how the whole culture changes with the leader, whoever that is. I don't know. Ben?
No, I agree. I mean, I'm probably losing my train of thought a little bit here, but I was tagging right with you. I think that you got to get to a point to where you need to figure out what energizes people as well. We used to be energized by getting together and being in crowds. A lot of people aren't that way anymore. They're actually intimidated by that. And not to say that that's a standard, it's not. But you need to sort of understand how people are energized and really try to focus in on that. I've got a reputation for cold calling people. Now, I don't know if that's a term that you guys use or not, but we work in a Teams environment, a Microsoft Teams environment, and I can just click on anybody's name and call them on video anywhere in the world.
You're like, oh, this is fun. Let me call some people today.
But I might hear of an employee in India that had a really good call with an executive from a large company. I got wind of it, and so instead of writing a note, I'll just click him. And yes, sir. What do you want, sir? I just heard about your call last night. It was fantastic. It's gone all the way up to the president of the company. Thank you so much. And it's like, oh, absolutely. But again, the energy there was not to make a big fuss and to send a bunch of things. It was just to say 2 minutes. Hey, it matters what you do and how you do it. So I think it's trying to find that happy medium with people. There are
But you
groups of
also
people,
just set the tone, right? So then that individual, where you had not only a time difference, but a huge cultural difference, you
right?
just illustrated some other way of connecting with a human that set the tone for him or taught him something.
Yep.
Yeah, and it needs to be both professional and personal to some extent.
Mm.
Acknowledge what's going on with people. If you have an opportunity to make a difference, do it. It's that simple, and I think that's true when talking to your customers. It's really, I think your customers want different things. And to use a script like we used to use or a 13-point quality check isn't always the right menu. I can think of one other example of a new employee we brought on, and I'll be careful and say he was a bit dumb. We didn't train him as well as we should have on the skills, but you know what? He knew how to talk to people.
Yeah.
And people loved working with him. He'd have to put them on hold and get help on all these other things, but they loved talking. He had the hardest skill under his belt.
Yeah.
And you
And
can't train that.
You
That
can't
is
train,
the
you
thing.
can't
That's
train
an innate
connection.
talent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I often talk to people that I work with and is, what's the innate talent? That's what you're really looking for. And I think that's what I ultimately saw in you, Cyndi, was your talent of connecting with humans, bringing
Mhm.
excitement, your attitude. You were just fun and crazy. I mean, those were all things I loved about you. Well, I'll teach her how to be an X or a Y or a trainer or a whatever.
I love
Yeah,
that.
and it's not all about the people who are getting it quick. It's a matter of again, the energy of the people behind it and what they're wanting to accomplish. And sometimes getting something fixed is as fun as putting it out there in the first place.
Exactly. And Ben, I love what you said. It's not always the ones that get it quick. And it's been a real journey for us over the last 5-6 years since we launched Wanderlust Campus and have trained so many thousands of travel advisors and agency owners. It's not the ones that come in the most talented with the most degrees that are the smartest. The number one thing that I've seen, it's the people that are willing to be consistent and keep working at it and keep showing up and doing the things. Those are the ones that are celebrating the, $10 million plus businesses and things like that. And that's fantastic because I think it gives everybody hope that if you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to be consistent, that makes a big difference. That leads me to my next question, which is, I'm looking at these industry reports that come out annually, and because of the increased confusion on post pandemic, we saw this huge rise in needing plugging into travel agents again. Right, the internet's getting more confusing, everything's getting more complicated, so there's been this beautiful resurgence that travel advisors, not just buy from a consumer perspective, but the suppliers need travel advisors booking their products and services. So the reports are telling us that we cannot train them fast enough, and more importantly, we need to get them to be skilled travel agents. And so in this world that we're living in of contractors, where there's not formal training, there's not access always to amazing leadership, how do you think companies and large agencies, hosts, people that are scaling 100, 200, 1,000, sometimes 6, 7,000 agents under them, how are they going to keep up with the demand to not just have bodies coming in, because anyone can sign up to be a travel agent, but how are they going to keep up with the demand to have skilled professionals in these environments where they can't really formally train them? How are they going to fill that gap?
Well, it's a challenge for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And you can challenge me back on this, but I think today travel is so different. When we were young in the industry, you used to have to tell people how to travel.
Yeah.
We don't so much have that need anymore. A lot of people know how to travel. They've traveled. What they still need help with is understanding the complexity of tickets that were issued and what the requirements are to get on to get a cruise set up, and the health requirements and everything else. It's really a lot of the logistics that they still need help with. And, unfortunately, a lot of these vendors, they don't really want a lot of simplicity to that, because it's revenue to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think helping them with a lot of the block and tackle is where the key skills are. Is, hey, I know how to exchange that ticket for you and get the most value out of it. Or I know how to book a cruise in a way that we can get you the best deals on the kind of cabin and service that you want. So again, they know how to travel, and you can YouTube almost anything in terms of even how, when I arrive at this airport, how do I get to the port? You can YouTube it. You can't YouTube how to make that ticket get generated.
Yeah.
And that's where I think professionals can play such an important role. And again, it can be fun because there are so many resources that you can even share with your clients. Hey, I saw this really great YouTube video on how to get from Venice to Trieste, and that's going to make your trip really easy. You have that kind of thing is easy to do now.
Yeah.
So I don't. It is hard to train though. We have to do all of our training remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Except, well, we do in the U.S. Let's go that route. In India, we do still have large centers in the other locations, but it's been challenging because we still need to train in GDS. We need to train in these legacy programs that make a new person freak out.
Yeah.
What is DOS anyway? and then then you sort of go into these things, and they see the value of their role. It's just a lot still.
It is.
Yeah. I think I would comment as a consumer,
mm-hmm.
for someone that worked in the travel industry for years and years. I truly thought I would never use a travel agent again, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what a travel agent is good at. I know but I know all that stuff. I can certainly do it myself. And then, as you well know, I connected with one of your agents last year that booked a huge trip for me because it was so overwhelming. Right? Back to exactly what Ben said. I could certainly put together parts A and B, but I had no clue how to put together C, D, and E because I've never been there before. I don't know even what the opportunity or options were. But the greatest result from me using that, one of your agents, was not only that she put together an excellent trip for me, truly she did, but afterwards we spent over an hour on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, tell me what worked and what did not.
Yeah.
I mean, she
nice.
did. And this is her agency. She owns it. She's got a few people that work for her. But, and I was very frank. That's just how I usually show up. And I gave her the feedback I thought she needed. And I continue to, follow her, and I'll use her again. But I just thought that was a huge piece that people are learning, not only from their leaders, but from their customers. You have to have that connection and know what worked and what did not. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. Well, and Stacy, that
that's
brings
a
up
really
a good
good
point.
comment.
Yeah, that brings up a good point because Melissa, the person you're talking about, she's phenomenal. She's actually a graduate of Careers on Vacation. She invested, she earned a certification, and then she went through another certification to learn how to become an agency owner and how to do those hyper curated vacations. She's really into kind of all those detailed. And that's the other beautiful thing about our industry is, when we were coming up, it's like you had to learn all of domestic, and then you'd learn Mexico Caribbean, and then you'd learn cruises and or international. Like you had these, we had queues. Remember, you had the queues that
Oh
you were
yeah.
in, and you could be in multiple queues. But in today's environment, advisors and agents can pick the niches that they, especially if they're home based, so they can pick what they want to do, and then they can learn just cruises, or they can learn just, and they can kind of, but the reason that's so beautiful is when they have a niche, they can really understand and know everything about it and keep up with it, because things are changing so fast. The suppliers, what's available, what's not. If they really niche down and have two or three things that they're really good at, they can build kind of these bigger businesses without having to do, thousands of training hours, right? So I love that you shared that experience forward.
The one
Yeah.
piece though that I wish, as again as a consumer, which would be important to me, would be, how do I find that Africa specialist? How do I find
Mm,
that person that knows
Mm.
India, or whatever I want to do?
yeah.
I do think that there are agencies and agents out there that are very skilled in these areas, but we as consumers don't know the best way to find them yet.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're going to have a solution for that. We have a registry launching next year. So, all of our certified agents and agency owners will be able to register and put kind of what they specialize in. So, stay tuned for that, Stacy. That's coming.
Oh,
We'll
that's
have
a
it for
great
you
idea.
and all the consumers. Yeah, because before we start in the green room, Ben was like, I might need. Might need someone for a particular, like a very specialized thing, right? And these are folks that have been in the industry for decades and decades. And even when I'm going somewhere new, I put a call into the specialist, because you can't know everything. I tell our travel advisors all the time, your job's not to know everything, it's to know where to go to find the information if you're booking, right? So since this is a mentor, thank your mentor kind of day, I wanted to ask you guys, what's the best advice a mentor or a leader ever gave you?
Mm.
Wow. You should have sent us questions in advance. That's what
See,
I meant.
it's all good. That's why we do it kind of on the fly, for sure, for sure. Well, I'll show, while you guys are thinking, I'll share mine. And this actually came. I was on a tour in like, remember when you could sell Trafalgar, and if you sold 25 trips, you'd get a free one. So I like did that every year. Anyway, I was on a free like 3 week trip in Europe, and it was fantastic. The tour guide was completely, his name was Jean, I remember to this day, and he was drunk every day, but he was fantastic at knowing the historic, and he told these like big colorful stories. Anyway, he's very, very colorful character. The day we got to Paris, we were standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. I was maybe, I don't know, 21, 22. But he's like, we always have a lot of young people on these tours in August, and I want to give you the best advice that you're ever going to hear. And I was like, okay, Sean, what do you got for me today, right? Do what you love in life and do it with a passion. That's what he said. Do what you
Do
love
what
in
you
life.
love
And
in life,
yeah,
and
do what you
do it
love in
with a
life,
passion.
but do it with a passion. And he somehow tied it into the guy that built the Eiffel Tower and all that. But the point being is, I remember that, like, I got chills at the time, and I think back to, like, when I've tried to work, like, I've always loved travel, and I've always loved helping people go through the journey of learning, right? But when I tried to operate outside of that, or do things that other people thought I should do, or things that I would be good at because I was just a good producer, it didn't fit, and I wasn't happy, right? So when I came back to travel, launched our Wanderlust campus, I was so in my element that of course it skyrocketed. But every day I do what I love now, every day. And so I love that advice. And I think, I look at my daughter and she's like, what should I do? She's looking at colleges, and I'm like, what do you want? Like, if you want to wake up, what do you want to do every day? That's what you should do. So I think that's one of my pieces of advice that I love. But
And
any
from the drunk tour
from
guide.
the drunk tour guide. I mean, you never know where the jewels of wisdom are going to come
Mhm.
from. And here we are 30 years later telling that story, and I still remember it.
I mean, I've had a lot of wonderful mentors in my life, and I think, most of the time, I think it was where people said, really hold dear to your vision. You
Mm.
might have to change how you get there a few times, and you might need to be open to some things, but that doesn't mean you need to change that vision that you have. And I said it a little bit earlier, one of the things that I was not confronted with, but I had a chance to sort of visualize is I think there's a lot to say about honoring people. We
Mm.
talk a lot about diversity and inclusion and a lot of these things in our environments now. And really, it boils down to not thinking about the differences of people, but just respecting the fact that they are a contributor to this world, and you just honor them where they are.
Yeah.
And you can get through a lot of the things that you don't understand really quickly if you just focus on the deed at hand and how you can really be, and you can be a positive to that person too, even if you have nothing in common. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's a hard world to navigate. It really is. And I think just taking the individual for what they are, I'm not usually I'm not usually stunned by seeing a difference or cultural understanding or things like that. They just don't strike me. People's behaviors do.
Hmm.
When they're unkind, it hits my radar. If they're angry, it hits my radar. And when they're enthusiastic and forward thinking and caring, that hits my radar. And I think
Yeah.
those are easier things to navigate through sometimes than the other realities. But but honor the people you're around. It makes a big difference.
I'm going to piggyback on that because it actually kind of sparked one for me. I worked with a vice president of human resources for a large company here in Indianapolis. And she became not only a friend and she was a client, but she was probably one of my mentors. And one of the things that she taught me, which piggybacks on exactly what you just said, Ben, was the only way she made decisions as the VP of HR was what is good and right.
Mm.
Hmm.
What is good and right.
Yeah.
And that was how they ran their business. What is good, what is right. And I think back to what you just said, people are the greatest asset in any organization. How are you connecting, selling, working with, developing, and building your people? That would probably be the other piece that, I was taught over the years.
I love that. What is
Yeah,
good? What is
and
right? As your
yeah, I like it
compass, your
too.
true north.
Hey,
You
that's
know,
just it. Say what's good, what's right here.
Hmm.
Well,
I just got back from a long 3 week vacation in Turkey, Greece, Italy, and it was wonderful. And after all these years of doing lots of trips and travel, I think I'm getting to the point, Stacy, that it's the people in those moments that I remember the most about that trip. I've
Mm.
seen ruins, more ruins than I ever care to see again.
Hmm.
But I really remember the people and the experiences that the people afforded around me. That's what sticks in my mind. And we need to keep that in perspective with our people and how we develop them and how they create travel experiences for their customers.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. When I look back over the years, I don't remember what projects we worked on or what, the
Mm.
problem of the week ever was, but I remember who believed in me. I remember the first time I had a little team and I was like helping them grow. So I remember it's like you said, it's like when it's all said and done, we're going to remember the kindness, we're going to remember the people, and that's what you kind of take forward. I have one last question for you guys. You both gave me wonderful, amazing advice when I was green and inexperienced. You kind of know what we do now over at Wanderlust Campus. What advice would you give me now?
I don't know.
ooh.
You might need to give us advice or me.
What
that's
advice
that's
would I give you? Well, it's funny how it's flipped because I'm so proud of you. I mean, I was telling people I'm going to be on this podcast. Cyndi, she used to work for me, and now she runs this big. I'm just so proud of you that it's even hard for me to think about advice that I would offer you. Um,
you're
truly,
not
I
you're
don't
not
know.
gonna make me cry. I'm about to crack, but you're not gonna do it.
No, really. I mean, you should be just you've gone through different businesses. You've stayed in travel. You're still in training and development. You're still that people person, and I guess just continuing to stay true to who you are. There's so many things that I remember when you were a young kid that you
Mhm.
said that I still in my life today. I'm just so proud of you for being who you were then, and you're still that person. Like you executed and followed through on so many plans you made as a 19, 20, 23-year old. It amazes me. So I don't know. Ben,
Uh, I I say the same thing. I think you said it really well. I think you're a person who created a vision and you sharpened that vision and you just did every step to do it. You've obviously gone through some pretty painful things to develop and get your own business launched. I've never done that. I can't. I've always worked on the corporate thing, and it's. I think it's really amazing. I don't know that I have advice. I think you're doing what I'm passionate about, and that is make your life a journey. It's
Mm.
all about it. It really is. And it's not about longevity. It's not about money. It's about the journey itself and those experiences that you have. And I think we're all blessed to some extent that, we've been able to navigate and work in that. But you've lived it and you've proved it. And I think you have an amazing testament to people who want to get out and create a life for themselves.
Oh, I love that. Well, and I want to thank you guys so much. The tears are here, but I'm holding them back. But I really want to say, because sometimes a student will send me a letter, or they'll say, I turned in my resignation to corporate today, or like, I did this because of you. And I don't know, I'm like, they're giving me way too much credit. But it's like the little seeds that you plant in people. And I think you guys
Mhm.
did that so well early on, and you continue to do that with the people that you work with. You don't always realize, like, when you love into people and you mentor them and you inspire them. My life has been absolutely changed and better because I knew both of you. I know both of you, your leadership. I'm a better leader. I'm a better entrepreneur, and you encourage my gifts. And I just want to thank you for that, especially for a young kid who's was so like out of the box and didn't fit in the box that a lot of, and later in my career, people did try to write me off or think that I wasn't talented, but really they just didn't get this big vision that I would have in my head. But you saw those little seeds and you kind of encouraged it, which is probably ultimately why I had to break out of corporate, because it just didn't fit kind of my journey.
Hmm.
So I want to thank you guys for being here. It has been an honor, and what a treat. And if you guys have mentors, if you're listening to this or watching it over on YouTube, if you have mentors, thank them. Like, take the time to go back. We don't always do that. Take the time to do that. But thank you guys for being here today. Hang out in the green room and we'll chat before we let you go. But guys, I'll see everybody next week. Thanks,
Thanks.
Thank
thanks,
you.
Stacey. Thanks, Ben.